All right, we got the Galaxy Flip 4 and the Fold 4 in the studio, and of course, the first test up is the drop test, one that I'm always nervous about, especially with these folding phones where, with all the moving parts, a lot could go wrong in the event of a drop. Now, for their part, Samsung has tried to make these phones more and more durable. They're using Gorilla Glass Victus Plus on both the front and the back, they have a all-new hinge system, and they even improved the damping material inside of the phones to help them better absorb shocks. Now, how any of that will actually translate into better real-world drop performance? Well, there's only one way to find out. Round number 1, backdrop. In 3, 2, 1. After that backdrop, both phones do surprisingly well, with the rear glass on each still fully intact. Now, the primary point of impact was on the hinge side, where the phones actually benefit from having this thin metal strip that runs across their backs, where on the Flip 4, pretty much all the damage was contained to this little metal strip, while on the Fold 4, it's mostly the same, but we do get a few scuff marks to the camera housing. But other than that, both phones still work perfectly fine. The phones fold and unfold, and outside of a little bit of cosmetic damage, you would never even know that they were dropped. So an impressive result in round number 1. Round number 2, hinge drop. 3, 2, 1. Oof. Okay, so that hinge drop scuffed the heck out of the armor aluminum that Samsung uses on these phones. It's particularly bad on the Flip 4, which just went flying after being dropped straight on the hinge. But the good news here is both phones still seem perfectly fine. Their inner screens are fully functional, and they still open and close without a problem. So while it's definitely not the prettiest result, it's also not the worst one in round number 2. Round number 3, cover screen drop. 3, 2, 1. After being dropped straight onto their cover screens, the phones survive with no cracks and no shattering at all. So it's pretty much the same story as with the backdrop. The primary point of impact was on the hinge side, where these metal strips here just seem to help protect the phones. Obviously, the metal strips themselves though are scuffed up as you would expect with anything that's slamming onto rough concrete, and there is some damage to the camera housing on the Flip and a few scuffs to the outer edge of the Fold, but really nothing too serious, and the important thing is the screens still work perfectly and the phones unfold and fold without a problem. So a really impressive result in round number 3. Round number 4, rotated backdrop. Okay, so far we've dropped the phones where the primary point of impact has been on that hinge side with those metal strips. But this time we've rotated the phones 180 degrees, so the primary point of impact will be on the opposite side without the protection of those metal strips. 3, 2, 1. And this time we get a mixed result. The Flip 4 suffers a hairline crack along the bottom left, right where the majority of the impact was, while on the Fold 4, the glass is still in perfect condition. I mean, there's definitely a bunch of scuffing across the outer edge, along with some additional damage to the camera housing, which I assume is what helped the Fold 4's glass survive here. Whereas on the Flip, well, there was nothing to protect the glass. But you know, even then, this tiny little crack on the Flip is really not bad at all. And it just goes to show you how tough Samsung has made these phones, with everything else still being perfectly fine. Drop number 5, rotated cover screen. 3, 2, 1. Oh man, so after that second drop onto the cover screen, this time without the metal strip to protect it, the Flip's glass completely shatters. While somewhat surprisingly, the Fold 4's glass is still fully intact with no cracking and no shattering at all. Now, I was a little confused by this result at first, since if anything, I thought that the camera housing on the Flip would actually help protect it more, but after taking a closer look, the glass area where the camera and the cover screen are on the Flip actually protrudes out a bit from the metal frame, whereas on the Fold 4, well, the glass sits flush across the board, which I think explains why the Fold 4 didn't crack here, outside of course, just random luck. But from the data that we have here, it looks like the Fold 4's cover screen is a bit more durable. But it's time to drop the phones straight onto those inner screens.
3, 2, 1.
And after the face drops, both phones actually survive without any issues. The inner screens have no cracks, and there's not so much even as dead pixels on either display. Now, there are tiny marks on the screen protectors themselves, which, is to be expected considering we did drop these phones onto concrete, but it looks like the raised lip design that's really meant to keep the phone from smacking itself when you fold it ended up being an asset here, with both phones maintaining full functionality in those inner screens. And what's crazy is there's almost no visible damage even on the outer frame, with the scuffing here being very minimal. So a really good result in round number 6. Bonus round. So at this point, these phones have proven that they're able to handle 1 meter drops relatively well, but I want to push those hinges a little bit further to see if they can handle a 1.5 meter drop onto steel with the phones halfway unfolded.
3, 2, 1.
Okay, so after the first semi-folded drop, the phones actually fare pretty well. They landed on those edges, so we do have some scuffing there, but the important thing is they remain fully functional and those hinges are holding up just fine. So we're gonna drop it one more time, this time straight on the hinge with it halfway opened.
And 3, 2, 1.
And after the second semi-folded drop, unfortunately, the Fold 4's rear glass shatters, even though it wasn't the primary point of impact. Now, the Flip 4, on the other hand, looks pretty much the same as it did before, but I will say that the hinge feels a little off. It's still fully functional, it just feels less smooth when you open and close it. In fact, it's even worse on the Fold 4, where you can actually see the phone pop a little bit at that last stretch while opening it. But the good news is this doesn't affect the functionality. The hinge is still doing its job just fine, and both phones were still able to pass our 15-point inspection, with everything from GPS to the cameras working just as they should. So overall, I'm genuinely impressed with Samsung's engineering here. We put these phones through a lot and they're still going strong. But anyways, that is it for me in this video. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the very next episode.